Welcome to Defense Talks and our Executive Video Spotlight series. We're here with Dan Miller, Director of Defense Solutions at SAP. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
That's a pleasure being here today.
So let me start with the question of how can the Department of Defense, clearly one of the largest organizations in the world, be nimbler and more innovative?
I think we have to focus on the people inside the Department of Defense and educate the workforce to take advantage of new technologies as they emerge. I myself was at a company, a global auto manufacturer, that moved at the speed of a glacier. And what I found is that to move inside that organization, just as I've served inside the Navy and the Department of Defense, you have to empower the people, and the people need to be smart enough and educated. Where we've established collaborative educational ventures for certification on new technologies, that enables that piece of the workforce to understand the path forward. But you also need to empower the workforce, not just with the cash to do the projects, but also with the authority to make those decisions so that they can go out using that knowledge that they've acquired and the tools that are in place to actually try innovative things. And also, however, you have to caution them to not try and boil the ocean, because once we try to boil the ocean, the projects get endless, they get ridiculously large, and then nobody actually implements any change. So start small with an educated workforce that's empowered, and you'll see that the organization itself, whether it's a large automotive manufacturer or the Department of Defense, can become nimble and then take those successes and let them roll to other areas of the department.
Makes a lot of sense. Next, the DoD has taken steps to better deliver software through DevSecOps. I'm curious, how can the department further modernize its approach to being a better builder, buyer, and user of software?
I think the department needs to take a step back from the data approach. Everything is about data today, and it's really not all about the data. It's about data in the context of what you're using it for, whether it's an operational process or a business process. So if you're buying commercial off-the-shelf software and tools, nobody goes in and re-engineers Microsoft Word and asks about the data. They just ask about the process that the tool supports. Look at the other tools that are being purchased by the Department of Defense. Understand how this commercial off-the-shelf technology works, and then let it manage the data inside the tool instead of worrying about the data tables and the data fields. None of the commercial customers I work with ever ask that question. They always ask about what business or operational process we need to execute, and how does your tool do that? And then they define the inputs on one end and the outputs on the other end that we need to meet so that we can integrate with other legacy systems that are sitting inside that organization and will be sitting there forever. And once they do that, they've taken their workforce that we talked about that's empowered, that has the authority, that has the education. They provide them a contractual tool to be able to execute these processes using commercial off-the-shelf technology. And the Department of Defense has OTAs, software acquisition pathways, defense business systems. They just don't execute them as well as they could. Too many of the larger OTAs stall and never go to production. Even when they had a great idea with an empowered workforce using technology as it should be, the project gets stalled because they're unable to transition. So I would encourage the Department of Defense to look at the existing authorities that Congress has provided and the regulations permit, and actually implement those projects and move forward out of a prototype project into production with an architectural framework that's well understood, with a solid foundation from a tools perspective that can then be employed across the enterprise. Too many spot projects from geniuses. The good idea fairy lands often. The good idea fairy is not always your best friend. And we need to take those good ideas that have enterprise-wide applicability and then move them into production more expeditiously once we've worked through the other aspects.
Appreciate your perspective on that. And then lastly, what emerging technologies do you think will have the greatest impact on DoD's mission in the next decade?
It's hard to narrow down and say that any one particular technology will have the greatest impact, but from my perspective and the software solutions that I work on, I think it's going to be AI and machine learning in combination. And the reason is that what it'll do is it'll take the mundane tasks that everybody does on a regular basis, matching goods receipts to invoices. We don't need to focus on that. We need to focus on the core competency of the Department of Defense, which is combat operations, combat support, and then we need to get inside the OODA loop of the enemy forces. And using AI and ML, we'll be able to take the mundane off the table, take those resources to focus on those things that allow us to get inside the enemy's decision loop, and then they'll be able to use AI and ML technologies to actually make better decisions and bring things to light that they couldn't see previously because they didn't have the time, they were working on mundane tasks, and they didn't have the technology. And I think those things in combination will allow us to succeed against an enemy that has a shorter and shorter decision cycle than we've been used to in prior conflicts.
Well, Dan Miller, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us here at Defense Talks.
It was a pleasure joining you today and being able to speak. Thank you very much.